The deal that quietly changed everything. It didn't happen with headlines or applause. There was no dramatic announcement, no warning signs flashing in public view, just a signature placed calmly at the bottom of a document that most people would never read. And yet, that single deal would quietly rewrite the balance of power forever. History often remembers the loud moments, the victories, the collapses, the scandals. But real power rarely shifts that way. It moves in silence, through fine print and late-night agreements, through decisions made when no one is watching. Today, this matters more than ever, because the world is shaped not only by bold leaders, but by the unnoticed choices they underestimate. To understand how everything changed, we step into the life of a billionaire at the height of influence. The empire was thriving. Revenues were strong. Confidence was unshakable. Advisors spoke of dominance, not survival. From the outside, there was no reason to believe anything could threaten this position of control. The deal began as a solution, not a risk. A partnership designed to simplify operations. A restructuring meant to accelerate growth. On paper, it looked clean, efficient, almost elegant. Legal teams praised its balance. Consultants called it future-proof. The billionaires saw it as a tool, something to support their vision, not redefine it. At first, the agreement felt harmless. A redistribution of responsibilities, a clarification of roles, a framework to manage scale. The billionaire approved it quickly, trusting the systems built over years of success. After all, this was just structure, just process, just paperwork. But beneath the surface, something subtle was happening. The deal shifted authority in ways that were easy to overlook. Decision paths changed. Oversight became shared. Control, once instinctive and personal, was now embedded in committees and procedures. None of it felt threatening. None of it felt urgent. It was all wrapped in language about stability and long-term protection. The reveal emerged slowly. A delayed approval here, a redirected report there, small moments that felt inconvenient, not alarming. The billionaire noticed them, but dismissed the unease. Success was still flowing. The empire still responded. The world still listened. What the billionaire didn't realize was that the deal had already done its work. Power had begun to move, quietly, legally, permanently. And the person who would feel it last was the one who signed it. The first signs were already in motion, and once they surfaced fully, there would be no easy way back. The changes arrived gradually, almost politely. No confrontation, no resistance, just small adjustments that felt administrative rather than strategic. Requests that once moved instantly now required review. Decisions that once came naturally were routed through new channels. The billionaire noticed a slowdown, but attributed it to scale, the inevitable friction of a growing empire. The reveal deepened during a routine strategic review. A proposal the billionaire expected to approve within minutes was instead deferred. Not rejected, deferred. The explanation was calm and reasonable. Alignment, consensus, governance. Words that sounded responsible, even wise. Yet something about the delay lingered longer than it should have. Soon, patterns began to form. Information no longer flowed directly. Reports arrived filtered, summarized, softened. Context was missing. Urgency was diluted. The billionaire began hearing about developments after they happened, not before. Each instance felt minor, but together they reshaped how the empire moved. The center of gravity was shifting. In side meetings, the tone changed. Executives spoke more to process than to vision. Discussions leaned on frameworks instead of instincts. When the billionaire pushed back, the response was never confrontational, only procedural. That's outside the new scope. That requires committee alignment. We'll revisit after review. The words landed gently, but their impact was heavy. The conflict began to surface emotionally before it did structurally. The billionaire felt an unfamiliar distance between intention and outcome. Ideas were acknowledged, praised even, then quietly diluted. Momentum slowed, not enough to alarm outsiders, but enough to frustrate someone used to shaping reality through decisive action. The moment that sharpened everything came unexpectedly. A major initiative, one the billionaire had championed personally, was announced publicly with significant alterations. The core vision remained, but the edges were blunted, the ambition reduced, the risk softened. When asked afterward why the changes were made, an executive replied simply, "It was adjusted during governance review." Governance. The word echoed. That night, the billionaire revisited the deal they had signed, page by page, clause by clause. What once looked like structure now revealed something else entirely. Authority hadn't been removed. It had been redistributed, fragmented just enough that reclaiming it would require consensus from the very system the deal created. The realization settled slowly, painfully. There was no villain, no betrayal, no coup, just a deal that worked exactly as designed. The billionaire had not lost power in a dramatic fall. They had handed it away, quietly, carefully, legally, and the conflict ahead would not be fought in boardrooms or headlines. It would be fought against a system that no longer needed them to function. 2 blank lines above are correct. The conflict matured in silence. There was no single moment where everything broke. Instead, there was a slow realization that the empire no longer moved at the billionaire's pace. Decisions unfolded without urgency. Opportunities cooled while awaiting approval. Risks were neutralized before they could transform into breakthroughs. What once felt alive now felt managed. The billionaire tested the boundaries carefully at first. A bold initiative proposed without warning. A directive delivered with old confidence. The response was polite, respectful, and ineffective. Meetings were scheduled. Feedback was gathered. Committees convened. Weeks passed. The idea survived in theory, but died in momentum. And that was when the truth became unavoidable. Power had not been taken. It had been absorbed. Executives no longer looked to the billionaire for final direction. They looked to process, to alignment, to collective responsibility. No one disobeyed. No one resisted. They simply waited for the system to decide. The empire had learned a new language, and it no longer spoke in instinct or speed. Emotionally, the shift was devastating. The billionaire felt present yet peripheral, respected yet irrelevant. Praise still came, but it was ceremonial. Influence still existed, but only in tone, not outcome. The empire still carried their name, their legacy, their mythology, but not their authority. The breaking point came during a critical moment of opportunity. A market window opened briefly, dangerously, perfectly. The billionaire saw it immediately. Years of experience screamed to move now. Not next quarter, not after review. Now. But the system required consensus, analysis, safeguards. By the time approval arrived, the window had closed. A competitor moved instead. That loss didn't make headlines. The company remained strong. Investors remained calm. But inside the billionaire, something fractured. This wasn't about money or ego. It was about identity. The realization that the very qualities that built the empire, speed, intuition, decisive risk, had been neutralized by the structure meant to protect it. Late one evening, alone in an office that once felt like a command center, the billionaire understood the deeper truth. The deal hadn't just changed governance. It had changed the soul of the company. And the system would always choose safety over vision, process over instinct, stability over greatness. The conflict was no longer hidden. It was clear, structural, and irreversible. And the next move would determine whether the billionaire faded into symbolism or reclaimed meaning in a world that no longer needed their power. The climax arrived without drama, but with devastating clarity. The billionaires stopped fighting the system the moment they realized it was no longer an enemy. It was the future they had already authorized. Every safeguard, every committee, every layer of governance existed to prevent the very thing they once represented. Singular authority guided by instinct. The deal had succeeded, and that success had erased its creator's role. There was no path to reclaim power without destroying the structure entirely, and destroying it would destabilize the empire, punish the people who depended on it, and fracture the legacy the billionaire had spent a lifetime building. For the first time, raw ambition met a harder truth. Some losses cannot be reversed without becoming something worse. So the billionaire made a different choice. They stepped back, Not in protest, not in surrender, but in recognition. Publicly, they framed it as evolution. Privately, it felt like grief. The world still listened when they spoke, but the words no longer moved outcomes. The empire no longer waited. It continued smoothly, efficiently, impersonally. And that was the final lesson of the deal. Power does not disappear loudly. It dissolves into structure. It hides inside systems. It survives leaders. The resolution settled slowly. The company thrived in stability. Investors praised predictability. The market rewarded caution. From the outside, the transition looked like maturity. But inside the billionaire, something fundamental had ended. Not failure, relevance. Yet in that ending, something unexpected emerged. Freedom, without the weight of control. The billionaire began to see the world differently. Ideas no longer needed approval. Curiosity returned without obligation. Influence shifted from command to insight. They no longer shaped outcomes directly. They shaped thinking. The deal had taken power, but it had given perspective. And history would remember this moment not as a fall, but as a quiet pivot. The point where one form of leadership ended so another could exist without illusion. Because sometimes the most important deals don't change companies. They change the people who sign them. Subscribe to join the journey. The